Welcome everybody. I think the live stream's now live. So this is a Finance and Performance Committee meeting of the 11th of February 2026. First up, we'll have the opening karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mākina kina ki uta, kia matara tara ki tai, eihi aki ana te atakaura, hei tio, hei hoka, hei hauhu, ti hei Māori ora. Do we have any apologies? No, that's great. Any extraordinary business that's not on the agenda yet? Nope. Conflicts of interests. I note that Salmon Reese's are noted as they're not being received, but they have been submitted, so that's just an oversight. Anybody got any additional conflicts to declare? Nope. And public forum, there's no items for the public forum today. The minutes. Do we have any? Is everybody happy with the draft minutes that were circulated? Can I have a mover to accept that they were an accurate record? Lydia, seconder. Sarah, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Any opposed? It's carried, thank you. Chairperson's report. I'll just give a quick rundown that's been happening in the last few months. The global bus lease, which was a big lease that was under review last time, has been successfully renegotiated, so that's great. We've had separate discussions about the Leaston Medical Centre that's on the agenda for later this afternoon, but that affects the valuation that's in today's report. I received a briefing on a couple of issues relating to rates and Selwyn Water. There's been a media release about the rates about a week ago, and there's an imminent one on a water issue that people will see soon. You're all aware of the details. Prioritisation process we all went through in January, that's going to come through in the draft annual plan rates figures. That I stress is just a draft, a first stake in the ground that we're going to work from. I've provided some feedback to the finance team on maybe looking at the way that we present the graphs on development contributions. And a final note for staff is that in the F&P terms of reference, we need to add that our CCOs are to provide us an update on their performance quarterly. So if they could please note that going forward. If there's no questions, I will move that you accept my report. Can I have a seconder? Tracy, thank you. All those in favour? Any opposed? Carried, thank you. We're up to the Executive Director's report.
Yep, thanks, Aaron. Mine's a sort of very brief verbal update, and it's just noting that the P&L that's included with you today does not include any remediation of the rates matter that Aaron's just alluded to earlier. And also noting at the next meeting we will be bringing forward a paper that sort of introduces the non-financial indicators that we've been talking about as well, so that will be included in the next pack.
Thank you. So we have our financials. If we can have the team come forward and present them, please. So over to you, Becca and Neil.
Can everybody hear me okay? Cool. Good morning, everybody. I'm Becca Hammond. I'm here as the Head of Financial Operations. And I'm going to take you through the operational report to the period of the 31st of December 2025. The performance reports are presented to ELT on a monthly basis, so this is just the one for you for this particular period. The high-level commentary excludes development contributions, and questions relating to the higher than expected position at 31 December will be covered off in the DC reports coming up. I'll take you through the overall council result, then break down into the revenue and expenditure, highlighting the key variances to budget. These reports will then show the council surplus deficit before depreciation, amortisation and tax. Before I start, I just want to give you an update on the forecasting. We are still working through the testing to ensure that the forecasted figures are pulling through. So the intention is to incorporate these forecasts into hopefully either the next report or the one after, just making sure that it actually gives you the accurate information. So to the overview, the net operating surplus as at 31 December was 48.5 million, which is 23.8 million better than budget. Into the revenue, at 31 December, the result was 109.3 million against a budget of 104.6 million, which is 4.7 million better than budget. As already discussed in the general rates, the main drivers of the 2 million positive variance at that time is the growth due to the number of rateable properties in the region and the January QV property revaluations being higher than LTP. And as per the commentary from the Chair and the Executive Director, Q3 invoices have now been sent out. Current billing is unchanged. Any adjustments will apply in the Q4 invoices, which are posted out in mid-April, and they are emailed in late April. So they'll be done by then. In the targeted rates, as at the 31st of December, the negative variance was 833k. The variance is largely driven by two main factors, the first being the legacy 1,400 properties that did not have the billing accounts. This has now been resolved and are included in the 6 monthly billing cycle rotation. The second is due to the phasing not allowing for seasonal fluctuations. In subsidies and grants, the 4.6 million negative variance is mainly down to how NZTA commits funding. It is hard to predict how NZTA funding is, as it's dependent on government priorities, and the transport team works closely with NZTA to improve the level of funding contribution throughout the year. We usually have a better idea of what the contribution will be received by the end of the financial year. Fees and charges, the 3.9 million positive variance relates to increased revenue from building consents due to the high value building project consents that are ongoing, and government levies, the quarterly waste minimalisation levies and the higher building accreditation and MB regulatory building levies are all linked to this. It's all linked to the strong growth in the region and is likely to continue throughout the rest of this financial year. Expenditure at 31 December 25, the result was 87.8 million against a budget of 93.3 million, which is better than budgeted by 5.5 million. Personnel costs, the main driver of the 1.4 million positive variance relates to current vacancies. 53 are being actively recruited and 29 roles are on hold. The PSA negotiations that I mentioned in the last report are now completed and any paybacks were processed in December. To maintenance, the maintenance expenditure of 2 million favourable year to date is due to the seasonal timing of work programmes and delays in contract approvals and recruitment. Broken down into general maintenance, 478,000 under budget, mainly due to delays in finalising the Cord contract and revisions and seasonal scheduling of water race works. I can confirm that the Cord contract revisions has been dealt with and is now complete as of February 26. In wastewater, 116,000 under budget is driven by the timing of key activities in the Pines treatment plant. Transport, 231,000 over budget due to seasonal programme phasing and flood-related repair costs, partly supported by the NZTA funding. Maintenance expenditure for grounds, plants, playground, undersurface trees and townships is under budget by 568k, mainly due to the seasonal timing work and the linear phasing used in the original budget. As I highlighted previously, the linear budget process does not take into consideration the seasonal fluctuations. The team are working on the financial year 26-27 annual plan, which will incorporate appropriate seasonal phasing of the budget based on historic trends. Consulting, legal and professional services, a negative variance of 341,000 across the group, the cost group, apologies. The largest contributor to the variance is in the consultancy fees. The table, which I hope made sense in the report, always shows the breakdown of how this cost grouping is and highlights the relationship between the building consent recoverable fees, personnel costs and consultancy fees. In other expenditure, 1.4 million favourable position is driven mainly by the seasonal timing across key work programmes. Water supply monitoring and roading asset management are both underspent due to the activities scheduled for later this year. Advertising is also under budget with major campaigns still to come. Election costs were over budget. This is mainly due to the budget was based on an old estimate of voter numbers, which was lower than the actual numbers of eligible voters in the 2025 elections. Since the costs increased with voter volume, actual expenses ended up being higher than planned. We are also expecting an ECAN recovery for their portion of the election costs, which is around 125,000, which is due in February. Other comments is that I printed out the dashboard for you again because I took away from last time that it was appreciated on a larger scale. So I will continue to do that, but I will also put a copy of that in the report for next time. And I welcome any of your comments.
Lydia.
Looking at the P&L and looking at rates, penalties and the number of rating units behind payment. What is the actual, I know that's a dollar figure, but what is the actual number of rating units that are behind payment?
We'll come back to you on that one, Lydia. That information is not available just now.
Okay. And just the other one is with our investment revenue that we are materially exceeding budget, and that's great. But part of me looks at it as how volatile is that going to be over the next 3 to 5 years? And do we look at what the downside modelling might be if we're not getting our return on investment?
So at the moment, the actuals obviously flow from the interim and final dividends we've actually received. Within our annual plan process, we base that on the published statements of intent. So that's the subsidiaries forecasting on their profitability and then their commitment to, for instance, the 50% dividend payable by quarter, etc. So I think that is probably a decision we can make through the annual plan process, whether we pull that back and be a bit more conservative or not. But at this stage, it's based off the published statement of intent.
And Becky, you had covered off the general rates part of that and the remediation that will take place for Q4. 6.2, I guess I was a little bit surprised, I think, to see 53 roles actively being recruited, and I know that we've had lots of discussion over annual plan processing and prioritisation that we'll get to, but I just want to make sure that we aren't actively recruiting all of those roles at the current state.
So I think I can cover that at a high level, and Steve can weigh in as well. So absolutely, there's 53 open vacancies. Some of those are going through a recruitment process, but there's always going to be an attrition of vacancies that come through. So we'll look at those vacancies similar to the conversations we had with the AP budget setting on almost a triage basis around what is absolutely required now versus what we could put a hold on.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing the number of rating units that are behind payment. Thank you.
Elizabeth.
Just one question. So just with the election expenses, I just think for the purpose of the community, it'd be nice to know what the election expenses are for council. Are we talking about, obviously, we wouldn't be paying for the paperwork to go out to the communities individually to each household, would we? Or we
Sorry, I can provide you with the breakdown of what are the different types of variable costs that come through, but there will be things like printing and other things that go through. But Election NZ did run this for us. So any further detail on the breakdown, I will provide that for you.
Okay, great. So overall, do we pay for the full election process in each district?
Yes.
Right, thank you.
Samuel.
Thank you. Thank you. The surpluses for development contributions, is that through capital works that hasn't been undertaken yet?
Correct. So the revenue are due to development contribution receipts. So when we look at the DC report following this, you'll see that quite often in some catchments we receive the revenue due to the growth with the infrastructure to come, whereas traditionally, like on the water and wastewater, the infrastructure were required prior to growth coming online. So that's where you had the other swing where we've spent money on the infrastructure before we're recovering the revenue.
Cool. I was under the impression that the cost for Cape Valley had increased, yet it's claiming that we've actually profited from that. Could you explain that?
Maybe I could pass it on to the Executive Director for that one. We'll have to check and come back to you.
Okay, awesome. A little clarity on that would be awesome. Regarding the active roles being recruited, I do note that you've mentioned that we're interested to know whether or not that's been offset by consultancy spend, so thank you for still looking into that. Understand that that's a evolving beast as it matures, but yeah, no, I appreciate that. Election costs, yeah, I found that confusing. So just to do with increase in population, predominantly?
I'll get you the breakdown of all of that so that it's detailed out how it works.
That'd be cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. One quick question from me. The rates overcharging, I understand, is not in the figures. Just a query on how the external review of that situation is progressing.
So the external review has started. We're having regular check-ins with PwC, who we're using. So the next check-in is on Friday, so I'll get a progress update from them. They're very clear on the timelines that we need to operate within to ensure that this is recognised and paid back to people as part of the Q4, as Becca alluded to.
Good, thank you. If there's no further questions, we'll move on to Neil's paper.
Thank you. So just quickly wanted to talk to a high level that the figures you can see in front of you as at the 31st of December is still inclusive of the water and sewage assets and debt that was transferred in December. Reason being, as at the end of December and throughout the month of January, we had to go and calculate what are the actual costs that have come in for work in progress, so capital projects in progress, finalising the internal loan calculations to determine what portion of our $300 million in external debt to the LGFA should go to SWL, etc. So those calculations have been completed in January, and those will be reflected in the balance sheet in the January month-end report to move the assets out and to recognise an estimated investment in CCO asset. Just further to that process, now that the assets have been transferred, a full financial valuation will be completed to calculate the value of the assets to be transferred, and that will also be taken into consideration in the valuation of our investment in CCO for the financial year end as well. So the reason why I'm saying it's an estimated investment in CCO, because after the formal valuation is done, that number will change, and that will be reflected in the year-end accounts. So if we look at the cash and cash equivalents on the balance sheet, the balance of $51.7 million were $34.4 million higher than budgeted. So as we mentioned before, currently we have a very conservative treasury management policy, which requires 110% liquidity rate. We are required to hold approximately $20 million of cash to meet that requirement. What we'll be doing in the 4th of March Audit and Risk Committee meeting is we're going to be proposing a standby facility for $20 million. We've done calculations and we're estimating that will save council approximately $190,000 in interest costs per annum, dependent on how interest rates fluctuate. That will enable us to actually repay debt as it matures to the value of that $20 million, saving us further interest costs. And then we've also got debt maturing. So the reason why we have to phase it with the maturity of debt is because the early breaking fees of debt is quite expensive. So we repay debt as it matures. Part of the transfer agreement with Selwyn Water Limited is also to, as they will be repaying debt in line with our debt matures. So there will be a further reduction in our debt in April of about $45 million, and then also in June we've got another $30 million maturing. So we'll be utilizing the cash in addition to the SWL debt transfers to reduce our debt and our cash levels if the Audit and Risk Committee approves the standby facility. Trade and other receivables of $22.6 million have decreased by $1.8 million, and it's $8.6 million higher than budget. That's most significantly due to annual prepayments with a balance of $4.4 million still at December. So those are where we've paid, for instance, subscriptions as a simple example for the full year, and on a monthly basis that is released to the profit and loss, and that will reduce to zero by the end of the year unless new subscriptions that are out of cycle with our financial year end comes online. And then also the $4 million drawdown from SWL, which was unbudgeted when the budgets were set in FY25. The rates debtors, so the quarter two rates bills were due in December, so we saw that settled, and the outstanding balance as at end of December was actually $0.8 million lower than budget. For property, plant and equipment, no big change there, in line with our capital expenditure. The main variance is still due to the final revaluation as done at the 30 June 2025 year end. That came out higher than the revaluation increase estimated in the previous annual plan process. If we look at the debt maturity table, we can see that if we were to pay interest cost purely on our LGFA borrowings, we would have paid 4.35%. But through our fixed rate commercial papers and our interest rate swaps, we're decreasing that cost of debt to 3.47 and 3.32%. So we're hedging our debt to decrease the cost for the ratepayer on funding our debt. Happy to take any questions.
Samuel.
Thank you. What's the likelihood of Selwyn Water Limited achieving their LGFA funding status before April when our loans mature? And who is currently paying the maintenance for this debt transferred to Selwyn Water Limited? And if SDC, any example of when will we reimburse for this?
So SWL is in direct discussions with the LGFA. At this stage, there are options, as far as I'm aware, in terms of whether the debt is repaid to council and we repay the LGFA as it matures, or whether the debt is just transferred. We're seeking confirmation in writing from the LGFA just to state, what would their preference be. For us, it would be a cash in, cash out if they were to repay us, and we repay the LGFA as our debt matures. Or, like I said, if the LGFA just transfers the debt from council to Selwyn Water, same effect. Interest is charged on the Selwyn Water Limited related debt, and that will be repayable as per the vendor loan agreements. And as I mentioned, we've provided them with our maturity schedule, so the debt will be repaid in line with our maturity schedule.
Cool. And if we're to pay back, will that just be dollar for dollar? We're not going to be charging them for that facility?
The interest rates are disclosed in the vendor loan agreement as well. So there is interest charged on the borrowings.
Yeah, but we won't be making a commission of helping. No.
So
cool.
the interest rates we've agreed with them is actually in line with the interest that we pay the LGFA.
Awesome. No, cool. Thank you.
Denise.
Oh, I just wanted to clarify the value of the assets that we're transferring to Selwyn Water Limited. Do we have the value of those? Have we had the values of those yet, or are we still working on that?
So we do have the values. The capital value as at the 30 June 2025 valuation was approximately $1.04 billion. In addition to that is the work in progress of capital expenditure up to the 30 December 2025. So, like I said, the full value, a new valuation will be done shortly to revalue the assets as at the 31st of December 2025 to determine the fair value as at the transfer date. And that will be considered in the share issue calculation. And so that will be journaled at the end of the year, but we will also get an external valuer, the same way we do with our other investments in CCOs, such as Cord and Orion, to determine the fair value as at the 30th of June.
Okay, thank you.
Elizabeth.
Just wanted to seek some clarity. It's been a long time since we had that initial discussion. The loaning capacity of Selwyn Water, I know that it was based on the rateable revenue, but is it also based on the assets, the value of the assets, the amount that they're able to loan?
Because I'm not indirectly involved in SWL's LGFA financial covenants, from memory I think it's about 500%, but those covenants are based on debt to revenue, not on asset base.
Yeah, thank you.
If there are no further questions, then can I have a mover to accept the report? Sarah, a seconder? Lydia? All those in favour? Aye. Against? I declare it carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Becca and Neil. Now we have the development contributions paper.
Good morning, councillors. Last time we had Rachel here to help answer your questions around applying the DC policy. This time I just wanted to quickly formally introduce Rachel Siguru. She's a team leader in the Planning Technical Advisory team, whose team administer the DC policy. She'll be able to answer any of your more technical questions around how the policy is applied to service connections, building and resource consents. Just saying, this will be the last report where we include the SWL portion of DCs, as they have now, as of the end of December, been split off. Year to date, we've received 27 million in DC contributions. Of this 27 million, 13.8 million is in relation to the SDC portion. There is a misstatement in 2.2 and 5.9.1 that says 7.8 million is in relation to SDC. We are actually 7.8 million above our year-to-date budget. So our annual budget for development contributions received for SDC is 11.9 million. We have now gone past that at the 13.8 million. This is part of the ebb and flow where we will have years where there's a lot of developments that come online, and thus we end up collecting a lot of development contributions, and other years, like we saw last year, where we have slowdown and not as many development contributions coming in. This is why when the LTP is done, the expected revenue is based on a growth over a 10 to 30 year period, and so we're not always going to be perfectly in line. There will be up years and down years. Currently, the increase is purely due to new developments coming online with very high HUI counts. The developments that we've currently been receiving at these higher values has still been in relation to the old rates. So this isn't quite the movement to new rates. This is still catch up, but from a high volume perspective. Important to note with the ebb and flow of things that whilst we are above our annual budget, we may not expect to receive another 13.8 million over the next 6 months, as we may have already received a lot of the big developments that are going to go ahead, and now we have a bit of a slower run for the next year. We're not able to predict that until the developers actually come to us requesting their consents. DC contributions are obviously tracking higher across all areas except community. This is because prior to this LTP, the community and reserve DCs were combined together under a single reserve DC. So anything that gets paid on these older reserve rates, all the DCs go into reserves, and it's only in the newer rates that we're seeing the split between community and reserves. So again, as we fall into more of the newer rates, we will start to see that split. As per the development levies consultation, however, they have split their DCs in the same areas that we now have, so we are in line with that. DC spend in community and reserves is lower due to our larger projects such as Whātaro and District Park still being in their design phases and having expected to have been in construction, but they are still going through design and consultation processes. Roading, we are also lower, but this is more of a timing issue based on weather events and when we could get work done. So we expect to catch up on spend on projects such as the Dunn Crossing traffic signals and Hoskins Road widening over the next few months, and that will realign itself. Our current SDC portion of the DC balance is currently 10.7 million above budget, sitting at a positive 12 million, whilst SWL is currently sitting at 44.3 million life to date negative, which is still about circa 9 million above where they were expected to be. So altogether, SDC and SWL have a combined positive life to date DC balance of 18.6 million. Are there any questions?
Sarah.
Just a quick one on the DCs. It seems to be, prediction of DCs seems to be more of an art than a science from what we're saying here. Are there any predictive factors that we can use to pull it back from a 10-year average into something that is more accurate?
So the trick is we use growth metrics to predict when we think those will come through, but at the same time, as we've seen in the past, resource consent, timing from when developer says they're going to do work to when a resource consent is actually requested and to when the work is then actually done can actually be spread over 5 to 8 year period. So we know at some point in that period we will receive the revenue and then the works will be done to adjust for that. So it would require a very close relationship with developers and developers informing us of exactly when they intend to go for their developments for us to even get close to that level of prediction, essentially.
With the strategic relationship managers, is that the right term? Is that something that we are getting closer to achievement?
For some of the property developers, yes, and I know the strategy team are talking with developers around developer intentions and when they're rolling out their particular developments. But some of those property developers aren't part of that program as well. So yes and no. Yeah.
Denise.
You mentioned that you're still on old rates. When do the new rates start to kick in?
So this is for resource consents that were put in prior to the LTP. So people applied for their resource consents which locked in that old rate prior to the LTP, and then it's not an... when is it exactly? Sorry. Rachel will be able to...
So when they apply for a resource consent, that's when the rate is locked in, and the rate is that rate for the life of their consent. After 2 years, we can undertake a PPI adjustment for anything that is yet to be invoiced. But so anything from, I think the rates changed and the policy changed on the 1st of or 3rd of July 2024, that's kind of when the higher rates came in. So anything prior to that, the older rate will still be honoured, but with a PPI adjustment where we can.
Do we have any idea of how many are coming through from that old?
No, we don't have sort of a set idea. I could perhaps try and find out a little bit more information, but it can be quite difficult when it is a staged consent. So it's not very clear that the whole consent has yet been given effect to, but we could certainly try and see if we can pull some information for you.
Cool, thank you. Also, I don't know if I can say this. When the split between community and then community and reserves happened, have we got a good record of what happened with that money and where it was attributed to?
So up to the point when that split occurred, everything was considered to be part of the reserves. So when community was split out, it was starting from zero. So it's having it is behind the 8 ball and having to collect its DCs to catch up, essentially.
Okay, so how does that affect? I'm just asking for the Prebbleton community. How does that affect them with those DCs gone towards the reserves, say Kakaha Park, and not to the community centre situation?
So it would still be planned in terms of what work was expected to be done, what DCs have to be collected. So the DCs, that's how the rate was designed. So even if we haven't, we would not stop works just because we hadn't collected enough DCs yet, because the plan had already intended for the DCs to be collected. We may just end up having to do the work and then retroactively collect the DCs required for it, the same as what happens in our water and sewerage. So just because we've done this split doesn't mean we're waiting for it to build up to be able to do the work. It won't affect that timeline.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Mayor Lydia.
I guess, yeah, it's so hard, isn't it? It is a little bit of it is crystal ball glazing. But I am just thinking about our capital works, and to me, I'm interested whether or how many DCs are at risk of being in our 10-year time frame. So noting that we've got the 10 years, if we continue to hold looking at our capital works program. I'm just interested to know, and I know you might not be able to answer this today, but it might be something to come back with, how much of that is at risk in that 10-year time frame?
So I believe only reserves sit under that risk time frame. Currently, based on a first in, first out, we're still about 4 years out before we would have to start returning reserve DCs.
Okay, that's good to hear. And then I think just trying to wrap up some other stuff is how confident are we that the new DC policy will capture the notion of growth paying for growth?
The advantage based on what DC Levies is looking at going forward is a more immediate reaction to growth. So right now we basically wait between LTPs to adjust rates and things, but based on the growth development levies, it will be more of a case by case. If suddenly a large development occurs that was never planned for, then that can be a trigger to then go in and update either the general rate or create a high overlay area rate for that. So it basically will just give us a bit more reactivity to be able to adjust on the fly.
Thank you.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, I just seeking some clarity. So with the resource consents, we're talking about the life of the consent. So the life of consent, is it a 5 years with a possible extension of another 5? Is that how we process that at the moment?
Most of our consents for subdivisions are a 5-year lifespan, and then they can apply for an extension of time, which can give them further time.
So what's that further time block? Because I believe that we'd had that in a previous paper and it was either 5 or 10 years additional. Am I right on that?
Robert, you might be able to confirm, but I feel, is it 3 or 5?
It can be variable, but generally it's 5 years. It really depends on the situation and the reasoning of why a lapse extension would be required.
Yeah. So the extension is to retain it at the original given price to that previous LTP. So is that at our discretion as to whether we would grant them that costing?
We can't use the difference in the DC payment as a reason to refuse a lapse extension request. It can only be an RMA reason, and being a DC, that's in the Local Government Act.
Right, okay.
John.
Yes, I presume the PPI adjustments are generally upwards. Are you able to give a rough idea of the number that are undertaken and the increase in value that we get from those adjustments?
Probably have to come back to you on that one.
If there are no more questions, could I please have a mover to accept this report? Elizabeth, and a seconder? Sophie, all those in favour? Against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, Peter and Rachel. So now we have the capital projects and performance report. Over to you guys.
Good morning, everybody. So this is a report through to the end of December, so it's 6 weeks old now, I suppose, in that regard with the numbers. I won't obviously read it through verbatim from start to finish, but probably under section 5, there's a table there with sort of the numbers, which is sort of outlining where things are at with the Selwyn District Council side of things. It was a budget initially of 86 million. The year to date's about 35 million. In the forecast, 65, and completing 75% of the forecast is what we're looking for. And then obviously Selwyn Water is similar numbers, 61 million, 28 million budget year to date, 24 life to date. About 39% of the budget at the end of December, and 99% forecast spend at the end of the financial year, and added them up was about 85%. So under the 5.1 there, it highlights there's a couple of areas that are having the biggest impact, which is around the open spaces and property and community services. And some of the, obviously the biggest ones is around the District Park, Whatarau, Lincoln Reserve extension, which people have discussed and worked through previously. They're some of the biggest contributors. And we're also going through, and you'll see in the report, we've spoken about identifying value engineering opportunities and contingency management. So we actually started that process with an intention of trying to provide an update around that side of things, or first a sort of indication of that in the next report. So there is some good news stories that are resulting in underspend, as well as obviously some stuff that is perhaps not so positive, but there is a combination, so we're trying to get our heads around that. There's also things like sort of market conditions, so we are getting some competitive tenders, although it is quite noticeable in the market that things are starting to change and turn, so I don't think that's going to be an ongoing opportunity, but hopefully it might carry on a wee bit more. There's 3 significant roading projects, obviously Hoskins Road, people are aware about. There's another one in Jones Road, and there's some work around Prebbleton, and they are all sort of in either have started or poised to start, so they're all on track with regards to things with actually happening. And the other one that we're starting to make some good inroads into is that we've spoken in the past about how the seeds are set for some projects 2 or possibly even 3 years in advance of spending the money. So we've started to look at the projects for next financial year as of a few weeks ago, and we're working through some of that, and there's obviously some challenges that we need to understand and work through, but we are hopefully going to be in a better space than we have been in the past of being able to spend money wisely, I suppose, next financial year. But as I said, it's going to take a couple of years for that to really filter through to get the all the benefits out of that. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Peter? I don't know if there's anything else what people wanted to, any questions?
No questions. Well, thank you very much, David and Peter. Oh no.
Got three of them.
Sorry, Elizabeth popped up.
Yeah, it's 5.4. I know that you've got constructions programs commenced on 3 significant roading projects. And I guess it'd be good for us to have a bit of an overview of what those are before they go out to the community. Also, you've got in here that the timings for the demolition of the Leicester Medical Centre currently being planned, and the procurement for designers of projects of Whātaro aiming for these services in February, March. So does that basically affect from today's decision, and then we'll go out immediately, because Whātaro's coming back to us for the annual plan, I believe. So how's that panning out with the procurement of a designer for Whātaro if that's an annual plan decision?
What's the best way?
Part of it is that this report was written in early January before any decisions had been made. So this was a point in time, and obviously since then other decisions have been made, and things will change based on decisions made.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Just quickly, what's the impact on our debt and asset forecasting in the balance sheet of delays on these projects?
I would have to come back to you to give you specific figures, but in general, because we are further behind, we basically just haven't incurred that debt yet, as we incur the debt as is required.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Assets, obviously. Thanks.
Yeah, Lydia.
I'm looking at the capital works there, and part of me is just like we've got the 75% there with the removal of Selwyn Water from that, and if we are currently at 19%, and you all know that I really dislike the using percentage of budget for spend, but noting that we are making the shift for that, and I know that it's construction season too. I guess I'm concerned that from point in time, if we're looking at this, to get from 19% to 75% is quite ambitious. And I think what I'm looking at is, if we're looking at percentage of spend, how much of that is, I guess, some permanent savings versus deferred delivery around value engineering? Sorry, I know that I'm sort of talking, I feel like I'm talking in a little bit, but
You're not,
if you get what I'm saying, like it's just really, we're looking at 75%, we're at 19 now. It's ambitious to get there by July, knowing that we're construction season right now.
You're having exactly the same conversations that we have internally.
Great. Wonderful.
So it's not a riddle, and we are trying to work through that, and that's what we're trying to get our heads around in a more understanding of for the next report. And there is some challenges without a doubt, and I suppose it might be a wee bit early to talk about what expectations might be, but there's yes, things will be some changes and differences and things, and I suppose the other aspect as well is that there's things people are talking about weather and those sorts of things. So things like if the reseal program is behind at this point in time, and people can probably understand why when you need dry weather to put bitumen on the road, and January hasn't been very dry, so and road metalling as well. So those sorts of things are probably at a much greater chance of being able to be spent, but there's other ones that are probably at a higher risk of not being able to fall into that camp. And so we're just trying to work through that and figure that out. And also the other one as well is obviously calculating what is the forecast expenditure for actually achieving the work, because some of the numbers may not be entirely accurate, or maybe some may be high, some may be low, but we're trying to get our heads around that to be able to give a better understanding of what is the real cost of completing the work, so that in an ideal world we can complete 75 or 80% or whatever happens to be of the projects, but complete it for less than that of the budget that's allocated.
Yeah, okay, so
That's the target.
okay, so we can expect next meeting we'll have a bit of a clearer idea on what is practical completion, what is carry forward, because all of this is going to actually affect our budgeting that we are doing
Yes.
for next financial year. So, you know, like at the moment that I'm seeing a lot of risk in where we're sitting.
Yes, I will tag that I suppose it is an ongoing improvement stuff, so it won't be go from 0 to 100% confidence initially, but it'll go from 0 to something much better than where we are at the moment.
Yeah, understandable. Trying
to make
a step towards that is good. Is good progress. But yeah, I think, you know, with the notion of trying to value engineer what we're currently doing in this financial year, there is a lot hanging on.
Yeah, and I think
his annual plan looks like.
I'll just weigh into that. I mean, David's covered sort of most of it, but part of the reporting is that step change between what we've got just now is the budget spend versus the breakdown and the broader transparency around what projects is what is the value engineering component, and what is ultimately the practical completion. We know we've had some systems and process challenges in that space, and we're currently working through with the digital team around the Apex tool that's being brought back in, which is essentially a bit of a band-aid just now, but should enable some better reporting as we progress. I don't know if Tim wanted to weigh into that, or if you're comfortable with that summary, Tim?
No, thanks, Alison. I think that's fair. We spoke last week about some of the key challenges we've got, and our systems and processes are one of those. And as they get better, you're going to see better reporting. But the team at the moment, all the reporting you're seeing is manual. There's no automatic reporting going on here, so everything you see is being manually delivered by the team. And to your point, Lydia, yeah, there is some risk here this year, but this is a really challenging year for us in regard to our capital delivery. But we're doing it hard this year, but we expect to see improvement from this point on.
Understand, and you know, I think that's the pain, isn't it, when you're manually reporting? Time is money too, and productivity, and that's the pain in this that situation. But you know, I think not having the number of practical completed capital works in here is not doing yourself any favour either, because we do know that you are delivering.
Yeah, just
and
how
you know, like I wanted to do the justice that you guys are doing this work.
Yeah, and just to put into context a little bit as well, there's just under 400 projects, so working through manually, even if you spend an hour in each one, there's a lot of time working through it. So it's whilst there's a smaller number that dominate, they all have an impact. So it's, you know, it's quite a significant task to be able to work through.
Denise.
Oh, I was going back to sort of what Lydia's saying. Some of these tables do seem a wee bit out of date, but that might be because of the manual input of them. So just regarding that, because it's got on here Lincoln Town Centre is green and on track, can I just check if that's the case? Are we going, how's it going?
As at the end of December, yes, but we are working through some things. I think last week it sort of alluded that there's some discussions with in progress at the moment around some things, and obviously there's some sort of commercial and confidence type things that we need to work through to close out before we can sort of and then bring that back to yourselves to be able to update on that.
Okay, so that would make it, would it put it more in the yellow rather than the green?
I'm not sure at this point in time.
Okay, that's right, thank you.
No more questions. Thank you, David and Peter.
Thank you.
Can I have a mover for the report? Tracy and a seconder. Lydia, all those in favour? Against? Nobody? Carried. Thank you very much. Now we have the draft budget paper. Over to you, Rob.
Thank you, and good morning. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing to develop the draft budget and the expected rates movement. So what I'm going to do is just give an overview on the cost-saving initiatives that we've identified and the journey we've taken to date, the timeline in terms of developing that annual plan, and including the consultation and the feedback we've received from yourselves in previous workshops, and to talk about what the estimated rates movement, which is a draft. It will still go out for consultation depending on feedback we receive from yourselves today, and identifying the savings that will be of interest to the community. So probably just setting a bit of a background to this is that there are a couple of drivers here. One is that the council has sort of directed us to look at a lower rates increase than is signalled in the long-term plan. In the long-term plan, we've signalled that it would be 13.3%, and we've listened to what you've told us to look at finding ways to reduce that. Other parts of that, as you're aware, is local government reforms and the government's direction in terms of councils focusing on core services, rates capping, and other things that are in the pipeline, which I know you'll be considering later today. So as part of that work, we've developed a tool, a prioritisation tool, to look at a range of initiatives and the options behind that, and have run a number of workshops with yourselves before Christmas to introduce you to all the work and the scoring. And I think that in November I came and talked about how we do the scoring and the methodology behind that. And so from that we've run further workshops to identify which initiatives and options you'd like to progress, which has then informed the work that we are presenting today. So the one key thing here is that Selwyn Water Limited will be presenting their own figures, so these will be excluding Selwyn Water. Just want to make that clear. Just a little bit of a recap on how the cost savings have been identified. As I mentioned, government has asked us to, was keen for councils to focus on core services as defined in Section 11A of the Local Government Systems Improvement Bill. And we've also taken into account services that we and functions that we need to do as part of our regulatory work. The other thing is that we've also considered whether the savings will actually trigger a special consultative process. Normally we go through that, or we do go through that as part of the long-term plan. Because of the time frame, etc., there are risks in terms of trying to do a special consultative process in this annual plan. So we've considered that as well in terms of some of these options and the work that we've been doing over the last 3 weeks. This is very difficult to read, but I know that you will have seen this before, which outlines the timeline for delivering the annual plan. We're at the stage where we're giving you this briefing, which is that sort of pinky colour in the middle of February. There is a very tight time frame to actually turn that round into a draft annual plan for you to endorse before we go out for consultation. You've asked us to factor in 6 weeks for consultation, and we've included that in the timeline here. It does make it very, very tight for us in terms of sort of providing that opportunity for hearings, submissions, and then turning that into a final annual plan for your adoption at the end of June, so we can strike rates at the new level from the 1st of July. And so there isn't much room for slippage. In fact, there's probably no room. And I know the teams are working really hard to try and make sure that we're presenting this information to you. So your guidance and direction today will be critical for us to actually achieving that. So this is the big review of where we've landed at this stage in terms of this is draft. It is an estimate, and there's a range of 6 to 7%. And again, there's still the consultation. So again, today will be very much about getting your guidance on whether that is within your expectations, or if you have any advice on that. Just to give you an idea of where those savings are coming from, as I mentioned earlier, we talked about 13.3% in the long-term plan for 26-27, taking out Selwyn Water, and then looking at what the cost savings are by the different directorates. And this, again, is a very sort of high-level estimate to come to that figure of around 6 to 7% in terms of the rates movement for consultation. In terms of what that means for the community and some of the projects or programs that we currently deliver, some of the things that we will be looking at is increasing dog fees and building consent fees, slowing down the economic development program, reducing the capital works program, which will then have an impact in debt savings, reducing grant funding, and stop or reducing some funding of some events. And this was really all, and review Whātaro and the Selwyn District Park as well as part of that. So this is really taking forward the feedback we received and the direction you gave us at a previous workshop for further discussion. So this is a draft budget. I don't know whether Alison wants to sort of jump in here.
Yeah, and I think similar to what Rob has just said, so this is draft and it's based on the estimated savings that have been captured in the earlier slides. But I think one key thing to note in here is this does include the vested assets piece, which is almost a non-cash item, but this is estimated at this point in time.
And really the next step is that we will be going into a public excluded briefing to go into more detail around those cost savings and the options that we'd like some guidance on from yourselves before we seek further direction to develop that draft annual plan to bring back to council as a briefing on the 11th of March and for your endorsement on the 11th of March to go out for consultation from the 16th of March for 6 weeks. So, any questions?
Thank you very much, Rob. I think before we move to questions, it's very important for the people watching to remember that the 6 to 7% figure that's been floated is very much a draft starting point, and people shouldn't start getting their calculators out and making assumptions. We'll move to Tracy. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. I just want to clarify as much for the people listening. That review Whātaro and District Park doesn't mean stopping them.
That's correct. It's purely a project review.
And so just to reassure people out there that this is not about abandoning the projects in Leaston, Ellesmere, or indeed the District Park. It's about looking at other ways to do this, to provide what these communities will use and what they need, and to make sure that we're doing that in the most effective and efficient way. So just to allay any concerns that they have been cut from something. Thank you.
Samuel.
Thank you. Just for everybody in this room and those at home, I didn't give up a large portion of my Christmas holidays and New Year break for a 6 to 7% rate increase. I think we can do better, and I think we owe it to our ratepayers to do better. So, yeah, glad it's a draft.
Denise.
Oh, I know we're supposed to ask questions. This is a bit more of a statement, but I would like to reiterate what Tracy said, that we're not completely cutting what's happening in Leaston in Ellesmere, and also to reiterate what Samuel said, that I think we could do better. I would prefer to see a number of 4 to 5 up there, preferably more towards 4. Thank you.
John.
Yeah, thank you. Just to help clarify for me, is my interpretation correct that by taking out Selwyn Water Limited, there's only a 0.1% reduction?
So I'm just going to invite Neil to come up and we can talk to that in a wee bit more detail.
Okay, so hello again. The 13.3% rates increase as per the LTP year 3 is including Selwyn Water Limited. If you strip out the expenditure and the revenue or the rates charged to recover the expenditure, it still stays the 13.3%. The reason why there's the 0.1% variable is because some targeted rate or some operating expenditure for Selwyn Water Limited included in targeted rates are phased over the LTP period of 10 years. So there was a 0.1% under recovery through targeted rates planned for the LTP year 3. That's why you see that slight reduction. But in theory, if they were to recover all of their operating expenditure through targeted rates, you would actually see no change in the weighted average increase of 13.3%. Because the targeted rates are meant to recover the cost of operating those assets.
So just to help me, please, that given that Selwyn Water has now separated, the amount of rates, and I don't want to go overboard here, that Selwyn Water are going to charge, that's a separate issue. I can cope with that. Mm-hmm. But just trying to get it clear in my head that if we're looking at a rates increase in draft further subject to discussion of 6 to 7%, then we add on top of that whatever rates increase Selwyn Water, and that's the cumulative effect of the rates increase proposed.
So essentially, if you want to pull that back to numbers, you would have to take out the targeted rates paid in your FY26 rates bill for water and sewage. You would have to take that out, and then you add on top of that your rates increase for FY27, and then you would add your Selwyn Water rates bill to get to your total cost as a ratepayer.
So, as finance isn't my area, are you able to just put a figure on that roughly?
I cannot provide that. I believe Selwyn Water Limited will be providing a draft budget update to council as well, but unfortunately I don't have access to the Selwyn Water Limited numbers.
I suppose what I was meaning was what's been removed from the Selwyn District Council now that Selwyn Water Limited is formed. Not interested at this stage in what Selwyn Water are going to do, but just how much are we saving or what's our reduction because of the fact that we've managed to get rid of the water.
From memory, in the LTP year 3, the targeted rates recovered from water and sewage is approximately $40 million collectively between the two business units. So the targeted rates from council LTP year 3 will reduce by 40 million because those will now be recovered through Selwyn Water Limited, dependent on their final rate.
Yeah, look, I think it's, to reiterate a few things, is that this is the draft number. This is the initial, what has come up. And I think it's really important to gauge that actually when we go out for consultation, we go with some options to say, this is what this number looks like, this is what this number looks like, and this is what this looks like. Because ultimately, this is actually our community's budget, so they feed into what this looks like. I ran a hypothetical number just before, and if we looked at take water out of my rates bill and then applied a 6% uplift to what is left there, I would be looking at another $300 for the year in my rates. And, you know, so that's how I'm looking at this, and I think it's really important it is very confusing at the moment to separate the two out, so taking the water away from our current rates bill, because the 6% or the hypothetical draft 6% would apply to that. But I think that actually time isn't necessarily our friend with setting and striking rates either. And so we need to prepare something, and so that is why we have this 6 in front of us. But ultimately, I still feel like we have a bit to do, and there are still additional savings that I think that we can find. But there is still process to take place as well, and so it is firming this up, getting a draft consultation document, and then still we as a governance group work our way through that and make the decisions and whether it is more or less for our community, depending on their feedback as well. So there are still hearings and deliberations to take place through this. So saying a potential 6 isn't locking us into that number either. And I know, you know, we've got other decisions that we can make around what do we want to do with the surplus, what does our investment revenue look like, and finding some other savings that that we can save in that. So, you know, just really making it clear that this is a very draft number, and there's still a lot of work to do for us. Apologies, no question.
Elizabeth.
The draft budget, you've got in here subsidies and grants, development, and financial contribution. So in terms of DCs, we know that they're never static. Are you pretty confident that you're going to match what's being predicted in here, or is there quite a lot of flexibility in potentially what the revenue will be for DCs in the 26-27 year? So could that ultimately have quite an impact, and are there any other revenues or costings in here that could be quite variable as well to the final results?
Yes, so as we've spoken before, and Lydia, the Mayor, raised herself as well, to forecast the timing of development contribution receipts is, it's impossible to get that 100% accurate. What's currently in the annual plan is based off growth modelling, and how developers and when they lodge their consents, we don't have visibility over. But also remembering that the development contribution revenue is ring-fenced for growth-related capital projects. So it does not influence the general rate. And the DIA sets the percentage of what percentage of the capital cost can be recovered through development contributions. Then you'll have your portions recovered through targeted rates, and you'll have a portion recovered through debt, and then there might be government contributions as well, such as, for instance, the NZTA. So it is a split of funding for those growth projects.
Okay, so just to reiterate, in terms of the draft budget, in terms of the revenue, most of the other areas are reasonably stable in your predictions.
Rates is based on growth modelling for rateable units times your rating factors, which will be determined by the weighted average rate increase that is to be determined by the council through this consultation period. Vested assets also based on growth modelling, and then you have your dividends, interest, those are also based on forecasting with interest rates and subsidiaries' statement of intents.
In terms of the savings that we looked at, so I won't go through that list, but that's slide 64, page 64 for us. Where we've found the savings for the annual plan, is that the sharpest pencil? So depending on what the community wants, we could actually be taking some of those things off the list and therefore increasing that rateable figure.
I think, Elizabeth, I'll just respond to that one. I think we've sort of noted this as draft at this point. This is based on the discussions that we've had at the workshops. And I think, as Lydia has alluded to, we go through this and see, is there anything else we can take out? So it's draft at this point.
That's what I mean, just the sharpest at this point, based on the work we've done.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you. You know, the draft is a good starting point, I think, as everybody's reiterated. I certainly appreciate the work that has gone into achieving a thorough process quickly in order to allow for that 6-week community consultation, which is pivotal to a successful project process. And I guess on that, we need to be absolutely clear and thorough with the information that goes out to our communities of how these savings are going to impact on services and the delivery of facilities, etc., for them, and really a good understanding of the rates value savings that each of these items are potentially going to have. I guess the question for me, are we confident that the proposed changes that we've got in the draft here are going to not be sufficient to trigger that special consultative process? Is everything sort of, are we confident that there's no risk of that?
We are at this stage. We have sought legal advice, independent legal advice as well, and we're due to get that any day now. But internally, we feel we have avoided that.
And then I guess on from that, if we are starting to dig a little bit deeper into some of those savings, do we have a fairly clear idea of where those trigger points could be if we are sort of pushing a little bit too hard in some areas perhaps?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Sophie.
Yeah, kia ora team, thank you very much. This is today's big ticket item, isn't it? I was doing the same sorts of calculations as Lydia and successfully left them at home, but thankfully it's fairly simple to do it again on my pad here. But yeah, I live in a very average urban house in comparison to Lydia's example, and looking at that, it looks to me like we'll probably, with a 6%, we'd go up by about $200. And that's what we're looking at the moment. And it is a draft, and there's plenty more to go. I guess the only thing I really wanted to draw attention to, and forgive me because it's again not a question, I have plenty of questions for public excluded. But just drawing attention to, we've mentioned about the fact that reviewing Whataroa in the district park doesn't mean cancelling them. I'd rather draw attention to the top line there, which highlights that, as has been signalled ever since the government started talking about rates cappings and everything else, a lot of the savings are actually a shift of the costs of things that may have been previously subsidised somewhat by rates onto those who incur those costs. So that does include a lot of fees and charges, which people may not have realised used to have a rate subsidisation component for various reasons over time. But that's the sort of thing that has to end if we're going to be meeting those targets that the government's likely to set, and also that our community is expecting. That is going to annoy people as well, but some of those costs can't actually be removed, so we're shifting them to the point of origin, is what this is signalling. So, kia ora.
Tracy.
I know it's the second time, so I'll be quick. I also was going to touch on the top line. And just noting that as part of our discussions, and something that we have to keep bearing in mind, is that the shift in dog fees, we have to weigh that up against at what point people will stop registering their dogs altogether because it's too expensive. So that has been something that has been discussed on that one. And the second part is a question, but it's rhetorical maybe for Alison. Wouldn't it have been great for our ratepayers if Selwyn Water Limited had been able to give us their figure before we made this announcement? Rhetorical, if you'd like it to be rhetorical. I just think the timing of that, it hasn't been a secret about the date that we had set in this process, and it would just be great if Selwyn Water Limited, who are presenting something this afternoon, it just feels a little bit like yesterday, would have been really helpful for our ratepayers, because this is then going to be half an announcement from the perspective of a ratepayer.
Denise.
Sorry, again. With the consultation that goes out to the community, would it look will we be giving them perhaps, I don't know, I'm just philosophising, like 3 options maybe, if you go for the really hard option, this is what you'll get. If you go for a middle option, this is what you'll get. If you go for a slightly higher rate, this is what you'll get. Is that how we will do the consultation, or how will that work?
If that's what you'd like us to do, then yes, we would do that, because as I think the Mayor has alluded to, it gives people greater visibility of what the trade-offs are for different. If you have a lower level of rates increase, there may be less events provided or something.
Yeah, okay. And then with the also with the top line there, I'm very happy to see resource and building consent fees being charged to the right people, but I don't want us to end up in the situation that sounds like is happening in Christchurch, where they're using all the fees and charges, say for using the pool and using other community services, to start to counteract the rates drop. I just want to make sure that we're not going to be heading in that direction.
No, we won't.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you.
I think Steve would like to add something.
Yeah, Denise, I think to your first question, and Rob's response is right, but I think, as you know, we've identified what a stop option looks like and what a pause or slow down option looks like, and what's the status quo. A lot of the work that we as a team are doing, and Rob's talked about that, is we're assessing what would be a change to a level of service, and often, so we might only have 2 options, which is a slow down or a keep the status quo. Because the stop option might be the trigger for a change of level of service. So there may be some options which might have 3, some might only have a slow down or keep going.
Reece.
Thank you. Looking at slide 63, if we go back, it's the breakdown of the approximate savings, 9.2 million. Reducing 7.2% of the rate increase to get a 6%. If we continue to make further savings, is that 7.2%, are you confident of that number versus the $9.2 million saving is correct? Is a percentage? So if we save more money, is it a greater percentage of rates decrease?
I think Reece will respond to that one. So the numbers we've got in there, I'll sort of reiterate again, they are estimated, but where we don't have a direct translation, some of it's targeted, some of it's general, so you've got a mixed bag of there. Mm-hmm. So we need to look at that as a combination. So a saving in one area may have an impact in another area. So we've sort of spoke to that before as well, is looking at, we can't just take out, say, $1 million, say in Tim Mason's backyard without it impacting other areas. Mm-hmm. So it's a combination factor. But absolutely, if we were to find more savings, that would increase that 9.2 million and would ultimately reduce the rates number, but being cognizant of levels of service and whatnot at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And so then moving forward, financially for the council, the surplus of 17 Is there a number that is required as a surplus?
Strictly speaking, no. We could use the surplus, and technically we're actually doing that a little bit here, because where we've got the inclusive of vested assets comment at the bottom, that's a non-operating item. So if we do run with a scenario, whether it be 6 or whatever that number may be, we will be running at an operating deficit, which is largely eating into the accumulation of the operating surplus that we've had from previous years.
So taking that percentage, I guess simplistically, and taking a 7 or a 10 million out of the surplus to reduce the, or to increase the revenue saved.
So, I mean, in summary, we've got, we would be sitting with a revenue base that's actually lower than what our cost base is. So we would have an imbalanced budget, which would give rise to the deficit. Because if you take that 17 million out of, say, other revenue, which is vested assets, our cost base would be higher, which would give rise to your operating deficit, which is essentially using that surplus.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. That's the end of the questions. Just a quick message from me is, again, to reiterate that this is draft figures. Remember that for the public, we had a workshop 3 weeks ago, and that's where we've got to this point. We looked at quite high level areas to save, and staff have furiously worked away in the background to bring us more detail, which we're going to get a wee bit further in the public excluded session shortly. But I think you've picked up a message that we're not just accepting 6%, we're keen to see if we can do better. And also I'd like to note that the long-term plan process, which follows the annual plan, is an additional area for us to then look for further savings. So please have faith that we are working in the best interest of the community. Thank you, Rob and Neil. Can I have someone to please move to accept that paper? Tracy, seconder. Denise, all those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. And now we will move into public excluded. Can I have someone to move that we do that?